Have you ever walked into a room and felt the unspoken pressure to be someone else? To shrink a little, smile more, agree quickly, stay small, just to be accepted? That pressure is invisible, but its effects are everywhere. You laugh at the right jokes, nod when you disagree, speak with filters, and afterward you wonder, why did I betray myself again? This is not weakness, it's a wound. A wound taught by society, reinforced by school, rewarded by social media. Be liked, be safe, be agreeable. But Friedrich Nietzsche believed this wound is fatal, not to your body, but to your spirit. He didn't want you to be good. He wanted you to be whole. What does it mean to be authentic? We throw the word around a lot. Be yourself. Stay true. Don't fake it. But do we even know what the self is? Nietzsche argued that most of us never meet ourselves. We live as imitations, echoes of the herd. What is the herd? It's the collective voice of everyone else's expectations. Family, religion, culture, followers, strangers. The herd tells you who to be, and you obey because disobedience feels like danger. But Nietzsche said that obedience is the real danger, because in trying to be loved by all, you end up known by none, especially not by yourself. The herd values sameness, but authenticity is different. To be yourself is to risk disapproval. It's to say, I will not shrink to fit you. Most people can't handle that kind of solitude, and Nietzsche knew it. He wrote, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. This is not philosophy for comfort. This is philosophy for fire. And fire always starts with friction. The friction of saying no when you used to nod. The friction of dressing how you want. Of disagreeing out loud. Of walking away from people who only love the mask, never the face. That's not rebellion. That's remembering who you were before you learned to perform. Nietzsche believed authenticity begins with unlearning, with peeling off the layers of borrowed identity until what remains is raw, true, and yours. But beware, this isn't a one-time choice. It's a fight, not against others, but against your own addiction to approval. Yes, addiction. Because being liked feels good. It's a hit of dopamine, a sense of safety, a moment of belonging. But Nietzsche would ask, belonging to what? To a version of you that's easy to swallow? Or to the uncomfortable, unpolished real thing? The will to power, Nietzsche's central idea, is not about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. It's the inner force that says, even if no one claps, I will still dance. That will is buried in you, not missing, buried. Buried under shame, guilt, fear, and comparison. The journey to authenticity is the excavation of that will. And the first step is silence, not silence as submission, silence as resistance. When you feel the need to explain, defend, justify, pause. Nietzsche believed that truth doesn't need to be sold, it just needs to be lived. So live it, even if they don't get it, even if they judge, even if it scares you, especially then, because that's when the herd starts to lose its grip and you start to come home. If authenticity means rejecting the herd, then what does it mean to live with that rejection? Nietzsche would say, it means freedom, but also responsibility. Because once you stop performing, you can no longer blame the audience. When you choose yourself, you are no longer buffered by the applause of the crowd or protected by their rules. You are exposed, raw, alone. But for Nietzsche, that loneliness is sacred. It's the beginning of real strength. He once wrote, "He who cannot command himself must obey." And that is what is terrifying. This is the essence of the will to power, not a lust for domination, but the strength to command your own instincts, your own fears, your own need for praise. Most people don't realize approval is not love, it's control. Every time you adjust who you are to gain approval, you hand someone else the remote control to your identity. That's not connection, that's servitude. The will to power breaks that contract. It says, I would rather be rejected for what I am than accepted for what I'm not. This is terrifying, but it's also the doorway to liberation. Because once you stop needing their approval, something strange happens. You become powerful, not loud, not arrogant, not defensive, grounded. Your presence alone begins to challenge people. Your silence becomes unsettling. Your calmness exposes their noise. Why? Because most people don't live in truth. They live in performance. And when they meet someone who doesn't play along, it threatens them. This is why Nietzsche praised solitude. Not because isolation is ideal, but because it purifies. In solitude, the herd can't reach you. And without the herd, you discover whether your values are truly yours or just borrowed. But Nietzsche didn't just want you to escape. He wanted you to create. The true self isn't just uncovered, it must be built. That's why he called the authentic human the Übermensch, the overman. Not a perfect being, but one who rises above the passive, obedient life. The overman is not a bully, he's not cruel, he's not loud. He is self-made, self-directed, self-actualized. And that kind of person terrifies a world that depends on conformity, because he cannot be predicted, he cannot be bought, and he cannot be controlled. So how do you start becoming him? It begins by noticing every time you shrink. When you say yes, but want to say no. When you stay quiet to keep the peace. When you dress to blend in. When you nod instead of speak. These are not neutral moments. They are micro-abdications of power. And Nietzsche would say, take it back, one small moment at a time. Authenticity is not found in one grand declaration. It's found in the ordinary moments where you choose truth over approval. That choice is your revolution, and it starts now. To walk Nietzsche's path of authenticity, you don't just reject the herd, you start crafting your own compass. And that, Nietzsche believed, is the mark of a higher human. He wrote, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." This idea offends the herd. The herd wants certainty, consensus, agreement. But Nietzsche offers something else: courage without a map. The authentic life is experimental. It's dangerous. You try, you fail, you adjust. And through that process, you forge a self that isn't handed to you, but earned. This is not about anarchy. It's not about chaos. It's about responsibility. Because when there's no one left to tell you who you are, you have to decide. Most people fear that, so they stay in the safety of borrowed opinions. But the Übermensch, he creates his own values. He doesn't wait for permission to matter. He doesn't measure his worth by applause. He acts, not to be seen, but to be. And you can too. But be warned, the moment you stop seeking approval, the world may push back. People may say you've changed. They may call you arrogant, selfish, difficult. But Nietzsche would smile at that. Because to change, to transform, is the most human act there is. In fact, he once wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But most people forget the first part. What does not kill me? That implies suffering, resistance, struggle. Becoming authentic is not easy. It's a kind of death, the death of the false self. And in its place, something wild and free begins to emerge. Something that doesn't need to be understood to be real. Something that lives beyond the fear of judgment. That's the life Nietzsche invites you to claim, not just for philosophy, but for your soul. Nietzsche's path isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And that wholeness isn't clean, it's not polished, it's not Instagrammable, it's rough, honest, full of contradictions, but it's real. The herd demands consistency, but the real self is fluid, evolving, alive. Nietzsche wanted you to live like a piece of art, not to decorate others, but to express your deepest truth. He once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos, it's your story, your pain, your questions, your rebellion. Don't silence it, shape it. You don't have to know who you are to be authentic. You just have to stop pretending to be who you're not. And from that honesty, something powerful emerges. Integrity. Not moral perfection, but inner alignment. Where your thoughts, words, and actions begin to match. Where you stop living on delay, saying later what you feel now, smiling when you want to cry, agreeing when you want to scream. Nietzsche believed that suffering is not the enemy. Lying to yourself is. When you betray your truth to please others, you suffer more. But when you suffer for your truth, you grow. The herd will never understand that. They will tell you to be nice, to be safe, to be agreeable. But the overman, he chooses something else. He chooses reality, even when it's rough. He chooses growth, even when it's slow. He chooses truth, even when it costs him everything. Because in that choice, he wins something greater himself. And so can you. Not all at once, but choice by choice. No one can give you your voice. You take it back. And when you do, you don't need to shout. Your presence will say everything. Now that we've explored what it means to walk away from the herd, to reject the borrowed mass, the next challenge emerges. How do you sustain authenticity in a world designed to erode it? Nietzsche would say, you must turn your life into a practice, a constant, deliberate act of creation. The herd repeats. The authentic human creates. To Nietzsche, creation wasn't limited to artists. Your life is your canvas, your thoughts, your tools, your actions, your brushstrokes. This is not romanticism, it's responsibility. You don't get to blame your upbringing, your culture, your wounds. Not forever. At some point, you must become your own author. That's the will to power. Not the desire to dominate, but the drive to shape, to choose, to build. You can't be passive and authentic at the same time. Passivity is how the false self survives. So start small. Say what you mean. Wear what feels right. Take space, even when it's awkward. Let silence do the talking when noise is expected. These acts feel risky because they are. Authenticity always has a cost, but the price of approval is higher. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are." That seems like a paradox. How can you become what you already are? Because you've forgotten. You've been trained to forget. Becoming yourself is not finding something new. It's removing everything false, peeling back layers of guilt, fear, conditioning, until what's left is unfiltered and undeniable. And when that happens, don't expect applause. Expect resistance. Why? Because your authenticity exposes their performance. Your freedom unsettles their obedience. And most people would rather be liked than be free. But not you. Not anymore. From this point forward, your life is not a reaction. It's a declaration, a silent but unshakable statement of, I know who I am, and I will not perform. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, the higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Let them misunderstand you. Let them question you. Let them talk. You don't need to win their approval. You only need to stop needing it. That's where your power lives. And we're just getting started. Let's now look at one of Nietzsche's boldest ideas, that pain, discomfort, and struggle are not enemies to flee, but allies to befriend. This is where most people turn away, because it's tempting to believe that freedom means ease, that authenticity means comfort, that living your truth will feel good all the time. But Nietzsche called that a lie. In fact, he believed that suffering, if faced consciously, was the path to transformation. He wrote, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Chaos is not your enemy, it is your teacher. When you stop performing, stop pleasing, stop blending in, you will feel exposed, awkward, alone, uncertain. That's normal. That's good. That's growth. Nietzsche would argue, if you feel discomfort, you're finally touching truth. The herd teaches you to avoid discomfort at all costs. Distract yourself, medicate it, rationalize it away. But the Übermensch doesn't flee from pain. He uses it, he listens to it, he turns it into fuel. That's what the will to power looks like in its rawest form. Because power is not the absence of fear, it's the courage to keep going while fear is still speaking. It's the discipline to hold your vision while the world laughs. And it's the strength to remain silent, not because you're scared, but because you've already decided. In this sense, discomfort becomes a compass. When something feels hard but honest, you're headed in the right direction. When something feels easy but false, you're drifting back into the herd. Nietzsche didn't want followers, he wanted creators. And creation is always uncomfortable. So ask yourself, where have I been choosing ease over truth? Where have I been hiding behind politeness, passivity, or pretense? Where is my silence no longer powerful but fearful? These questions are not rhetorical. They're revolutionary. Because every honest answer is a door, a step, a break in the illusion. And when enough illusions break, reality appears. That's where the authentic life begins. Not in comfort, but in courage. Not in applause, but in clarity. And clarity always feels like solitude at first. But in that solitude, you find the voice that was buried under years of noise. And that voice, quiet, steady, real, is the only approval you'll ever need. Let's end where all transformation truly begins, with the decision to take yourself seriously. Nietzsche did not believe in waiting for the world to understand you. He believed in becoming someone who doesn't need to be understood, only lived. This is not about arrogance, it's about alignment. When you no longer bend to gain acceptance, something extraordinary happens. People begin to feel your presence. They sense the weight of someone who knows who they are. You don't need to perform. You don't need to persuade. You don't even need to explain. Your silence speaks. Your stillness commands. Your energy answers the questions others haven't yet asked. But getting to this point requires discipline. Discipline to say no when yes would win approval. Discipline to hold still when movement would earn applause. Discipline to stay honest when a lie would be easier. This is the will to power in practice. Not shouting, not posturing, but building a self that cannot be shaken. One day someone will ask you how you became so calm, so certain, so grounded, and you'll know it wasn't a sudden insight. It was hundreds of invisible choices. Choosing solitude over superficiality, choosing principle over popularity, choosing depth over distraction. Every moment you chose yourself, you became more. You didn't find your authenticity, you forged it. And now when you walk into a room, you don't need to say much. People feel it. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. That's the path Nietzsche laid out. Not for the many, but for the few. And now you walk it, not because it's easy, but because it's true. So take a breath, step forward, and remember, you never needed their approval, only your own.